Scholar Program through the Flex option. Some of you, I'll obviously be explaining it in much greater detail later in the presentation, but throughout the course of the webinar today, I'll be just giving you some details about the Fulbright U.S. Scholar Program, exactly what the Flex option is, and how it could maybe be a benefit to you as an applicant. And then joining me today are Victor Carmona, Vanessa Rouget, and Paul Ode, who are all alumni of the program who have pursued this option. And so they're going to have a chance to just share their story, and hopefully you'll be able to, learn from it, see if this could work for you. And then at the end, we'll be happy to take questions you might have. So with that, I think we can get started. So if you found your way to this webinar today, you may be somewhat familiar with the Fulbright program already. But just to recap, Fulbright is the flagship educational and cultural exchange program of the U.S. government. We are sponsored by the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, and we were established in 1946. So this year is our 75th year. It's actually a banner year for us. It's something we're very proud of. And the program was founded with the mission to foster mutual understanding between nations, advance knowledge across communities, and improve lives around the world. I realize that those sound like a very lofty goal, but it really is at the core of what we do and motivates our work here at Fulbright. So it's very essential to really the philosophy behind the program. So to that end, we work with partners in over 160 countries around the world to offer passionate and accomplished faculty, professionals, artists, and people in all kinds of fields to conduct research, teach, and carry out professional projects. Fulbright was really founded with the concept of because historically diplomacy was simply governments talking to governments. And for the first time really in our nation's history, the U.S. government wanted to create an opportunity for people instead to talk to people around the world, to just create mutual understanding. And really, America is, there's really a wide breadth of American experiences that are not always communicated by simply governments talking to each other. And so this really just helps, Americans learn more about the world in a more rich and inclusive way, and helps people around the world learn more about the United States. And kind of to that end, diversity and inclusion is actually quite central to the work that we do here at Fulbright. As I mentioned, this program gives people the chance to represent their own unique American experience. We all live differently as Americans and have our own experiences. And so those are all, in their own ways, representations of America. And so, with that in mind, I always just like to make sure that, everyone knows that regardless of who you are or where you're from in the United States, there is, Fulbright definitely has a place for you, and, you can contribute your story to this program. So why Fulbright? Why is this something you would pursue? Fulbright can be transformational. It helps you foster relationships that are real and long-lasting. It can help you, expand your publishing network for a researcher. If you teach, it can help you become more multicultural in the classroom and serve as an ambassador for international exchange. And Fulbright is, you may be aware, Fulbright's a very recognizable and well-regarded program. So if you become an alum, you're, of course, part of that alumni network, but you also then are recognized really for the rest of your career as someone who was a Fulbright scholar. Fulbright is also quite family-friendly compared to other fellowships and grants. About 60% of our awards around the world provide some kind of dependent support. And we're always pleased to see that many Fulbright dependents, whether it's partners or children, can go on to, be profoundly affected by this experience in a positive way. And so that's something I think if you're taking family with you, that's definitely a family effort, and the family also benefits from their presence abroad as well. And Fulbright is supportive. Fulbright staff here at IIE, my colleagues and I will work with about 3/4 of applicants who do eventually apply. And then once you are granted an award, you continue to work with staff here at IIE, but also in the host country to where you're going. You have different types of support throughout your experience, and we're all really here to just make sure that, your award is a successful one. And then you also continue on to have access to Fulbright Alumni as a resource as well. And in terms of scope, Fulbright is almost unmatched, I would say, in terms of fellowship programs for Americans. We fund over 8,000 awards annually. Those are spread out, as you can see, across awards for really this audience, like U.S. scholars and administrators, but also there are separate awards for visiting scholars, for other people from other countries to come here to do similar activities, as well as programs for U.S. and visiting students and language teaching assistants. Throughout the last 75 years, about 400,000 people have participated in this program, and its scope is also, I think, demonstrative of its impact, and again, that's something we're very proud of here. So is this for you? To be eligible for the U.S. Scholar Program, you do need to be a U.S. citizen. That's a requirement for any award. The degree and experience that you need is can vary. So I would encourage you to look closely at the award you're considering to see what's required. There are many that require a PhD or a terminal degree, such as an MFA, but there are many others that are open to people who might have an MA in appropriate teaching or professional and artistic experience. There's also, you may have heard, if Fulbright is something you've been following for some time, that there are always there's always some kind of limit in place to, for alumni. And also if there are any alumni who are participating today, thank you for being willing to maybe consider another Fulbright journey. So that just so you're aware, the restriction is that 2 years need to elapse between the end of your previous award and the application for your next award. So the awards I'll be talking about today are all, the application deadline is September 15th of this year. So that means your previous Fulbright will need to have ended by September 15th of 2019. So we talked about, who this is for, why you should pursue it, but should you pursue it? These are some things you should consider before you apply. Just to kind of reflect for yourself, thinking about your own life professionally and personally, how could this benefit you and those around you? Also, if you're affiliated with an institution here in the United States, how could this maybe benefit your home institution? If you're at a college or university, could this positively impact your campus, your department, that sort of thing? And also think through just, if you do choose to pursue this, I think many faculty can be supported in some way by their home institution as well, whether that's maybe support during the application process or maybe even while you're on your grant. So I would encourage you to, just look into that if you choose to pursue an award, because you may have more resources available to you than you think. So how would you select an award? So there are over 400 awards that are offered in this year, and those are, you can search them by, by country, by discipline, and other sorts of things. But when you're considering different opportunities, just make sure that the country interest, expertise, and career profile is, consistent with you as a scholar. Could you contribute to, how could you, through this award, contribute to what's being proposed? Some awards have language requirements, many do not, so just that's something to consider. And also just to make sure that your project and discipline are relevant to what is being sought for that specific opportunity. So today we wanted to talk about the Flex option. So Flex is, Fulbright historically has always funded scholars to be in country for a specific period of time. And so Flex is something that began a few years ago too, and again, I think our alumni will be able to speak in great detail about how this is beneficial to them, that Flex, instead of going to a country for one prolonged period of time, say maybe 1 6-month grant, awards that allow the Flex option let you break up that time into maybe into shorter trips over 1 to 2 years, depending on the opportunity. So I think, as you all can imagine, I think it's often pursued through, I think research projects sometimes can be particularly well suited to being structured this way, but not necessarily unique to research. But I think just the nature of the way work is done now, it's good, people have a higher capacity to collaborate remotely. And, it does take a little bit more coordination on your part as an applicant, but I think you can really, and I think our alumni will be able to speak to this, just the benefits of you being able to go multiple times over a longer period of time can really pay off in the end. I just wanted to review there are awards available in every world region that allow for this option. So just wanted to review some things that are available for this coming application cycle. So in Europe and Eurasia, there are many awards that offer it. Europe actually has a couple hundred awards, many of which allow for this option. A few that we wanted to feature were in Austria, an award specific to the Natural History Museum for a visiting researcher. In Azerbaijan, there's an all disciplines award, and also just kind of a Fulbright term I wanted to explain. If something is all disciplines, that truly means all disciplines unless otherwise noted. Your application is always reviewed on its own merit. And so, because some people may think like, well, you say all disciplines, but is there something you prefer? And if the country office does not indicate to us that they're looking for something specific, which is often the case, then it's really open for everyone. So as long as you meet the other eligibility criteria, that's something that you could pursue. And it's good to keep in mind in case you don't necessarily see something that looks like it fits you specifically. Like the Vienna visiting researcher is a great example. That's a very narrow group of people who would be eligible to pursue that award. So in many countries there's an all disciplines option as well. So keep you in mind, just for you to be aware, that's really often an open option for scholars. So the All Disciplines Award in Azerbaijan is looking for people for 4 to 6 months, excuse me. And this is open for teaching as well. In France, there's a specific award in northern France, in Hauts-de-France, looking for a researcher to come for a 3 to 12 month stay. In North Macedonia, there's also an All Disciplines Award, and in Spain, there is an All Disciplines Award looking for a more senior faculty member to teach and conduct research concurrently. In South and Central Asia, there are 6 awards in the region that offer the flex option, and the ones we wanted to feature today are in India, Nepal, Central Asia, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan. As you can see, in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, they are both all disciplines awards, so they're really open to anyone in any field. There is a regional award in Central Asia for teaching of, for TEFL, for teaching English as a foreign language. Nepal has a research award that again is quite open and is for which flex is an option, and the Fulbright Nehru Academic and Professional Excellence Award in India. And within the Western Hemisphere, so for State Department programs, that's really Canada all the way down to Argentina, so the Americas. This is actually a popular option in the Western Hemisphere. Throughout the region, there are 25 awards that offer this, that allow you to take these shorter trips over a longer period of time. I think you'll see in Brazil, which offers many awards, all the awards in Brazil allow you to pursue a flex option. So if Brazil is of interest to you, that's definitely something you can investigate. The All Disciplines Awards in Bolivia, Canada, and Peru also provide the flex option to applicants. Bear with me just a moment. Okay. In Sub-Saharan Africa and East Asia and the Pacific, flex is still an option, but it's a smaller number of awards. In Sub-Saharan Africa, the Africa Regional Research Program, or ARRP, is one of our regional research programs, as you can see, that allows you to pursue a research project that requires you to go to 2 or more countries throughout the region of Sub-Saharan Africa. So I think and I find within all of our awards in the region, that tends to be a popular award because it does give you the flexibility to go to multiple locations. In Japan, there's an All Disciplines Award for research that is open to flex. And there's also a journalism opportunity in Japan, which I would actually say globally is a pretty unique one. It is not specific for faculty. It's actually specifically for practicing journalists. So it's intended for people from the United States to be more familiar professionally with Japan and the media landscape there. And similarly, there is an All Disciplines Award in Singapore that also allows for the flex option. And in the Middle East and North Africa, we are also, there are 9 awards throughout the region that allow for you to make these shorter trips. Specifically, we wanted to highlight for you, similar to Sub-Saharan Africa, there's also a Middle East and North Africa regional research program that, again, I do find particularly for those sorts of research projects, I think being able to take multiple shorter trips over a longer period of time, a lot of research projects submitted there are actually quite conducive to that structure. Similarly, in Morocco, there is an All Disciplines Award that would be open to you. In the West Bank, there is an award specific to media and journalism, and this is more, versus the other award that was more for practicing journalists. This is more intended for, people in academia to teach journalism and media in the West Bank. And in Qatar, there is actually an award, kind of a unique opportunity in the region where water is obviously a huge concern. So water and energy and the environment at Hamad bin Khalifa University is looking for someone to conduct a research project there, and that could also be done through Flex. So to apply for Fulbright Awards, I think what's required is actually somewhat straightforward. In addition to an application form, as you would imagine, we also look for a project statement, which to me is really the main part of your proposal, where you set out what you plan to do, how you plan to do it, and why you should be the person to take on this project and receive support for it in these specific places. As applicants who are interested in Flex, I did want to stress that when you propose, and I think our alumni could also speak to this somewhat, is how plans often can change, but regardless of knowing that things might change over time, you are expected to lay out your proposed plans for making these multiple trips in your project statement, and to make that very clear that this is the structure you wanted to pursue. And in addition to that, just the other components that are listed here, as you can see, they're somewhat straightforward. Just wanted you to be aware of what we're looking for. So with that, that is enough from me. Our alumni have been very generous with their time, and are joined us today to just share their stories as U.S. Fulbright scholars who have successfully applied for and carried out these kinds of projects within this structure. So I would like to give them the chance to share their experiences with you all. So first we have Vanessa, who would like to go first.
Yes, hi everyone. Everybody can hear me? Great. So my name is Vanessa Ruger. I teach political science at Salem State University. And in 2015, I applied for a Flex award to go to Kyrgyzstan, which is in Central Asia, to complete a research project on labor migration to Russia. And I had a specific research question, which I can go in more details if needed. But I think the point here is really to focus on the grant itself. And the reasons I applied, or I was interested in the Flex option, first, I think logistically, for some of us who have busy professional schedules, a family in the United States, it's much easier to coordinate with your various responsibilities. But also in terms of the research, I really like the idea of going multiple times, just exploring new hypotheses as they emerge, just kind of piloting, during my first trip, piloting the research and then refining it for the second trip. So that allowed for a research that I think was more productive and in depth, but also to establish long-term collaborations with partners in Kyrgyzstan because of these repeated trips. I applied to go over a period of 2 years and to do 3 segments. One was in the spring of 2017, one in the summer of 2018, and the last one was supposed to be in January of 2019. I had some personal family reasons and unfortunately had to cancel the last segment. But I successfully completed the first 2. And when I was in Kyrgyzstan, I was associated with a research center at the American University. And our research center, one of their focus is labor migration. So that was really a perfect setting for me to be in, allowed me to connect with a lot of scholars and to be at a university that is located in a capital city. So there's a lot of NGOs and international organizations, government agencies. And so that really allowed me to complete my field work successfully, including interviewing experts and officials at various organizations, as well as interviews with migrants and return migrants. So some of the things I want to emphasize. So first, in terms of the research, so it was extremely productive in various ways, led me to publish. So first of all, I collaborated very closely with one partner there. And I have to say, I had actually been to Kyrgyzstan in the past before this trip. Had taught and researched there. So that made things a little bit easier in terms of setting up this Flex Award. But going back after a long period of time where I had not visited Kyrgyzstan was extremely productive. So first of all, it allowed me to reconnect with the country and the changing politics of the place, but also to really be extremely efficient with the research. So my partner and I, my local colleague and I, published one article. Another one is coming out soon. We worked on a project a year later that is also going to be published. And we also developed some collaboration around teaching. And this academic year did a COIL program. So I don't know if you know about COIL. COIL is Collaborative Online International Learning. And it's so basically we were both teaching a class on migration at the same time. And our students were engaging with each other through technology. To complete assignments and have classes, not simultaneously because of the 10 hours difference, but through recordings and various other projects. So it's been a very, very productive collaboration. And when I was in Kyrgyzstan during this month, there was a lot of other opportunities for me as well. I was invited to be to participate in the thesis defense of the sociology department. I presented at conferences. I gave some guest lectures. So there's a lot more than just your own recent project if you are willing to engage with people in the country. So the last thing, I know we don't have a lot of time and I can answer questions later, but just a few things maybe I would say in terms of thoughts about the process of applying and going to Kyrgyzstan specifically. So when I applied for the award, I was part of a group of faculty at my university that met throughout the summer on a regular basis because we were all applying for Fulbright. And one thing that seemed to be the common challenge was to get the letter of invitation. So in my case, it was a little bit easier because I had been to Kyrgyzstan before and I knew people already. But for some of my colleagues, this was really the most difficult aspect of the application. So I think that's something to remember, once you've decided which award you want to apply to really start early to contact people in the country so that you can try to secure that invitation as soon as possible. I also had a language requirement as part of the Kyrgyz Flex Award. There's a Russian, I don't remember if it's Russian or Kyrgyz, but in my case, I speak Russian, so that, but I had to prove, I don't know if you probably can also just have Kyrgyz language. So I think it depends on the awards. I would say, so the thing that Jacqueline has mentioned is the flexibility aspect of it. So as I mentioned, I had unfortunately compelling, things that happened that I could not finish the last segment, but I also had to rearrange some of the timelines that I had set up originally. And I would say even in terms of, even if things go smoothly, you still have, I think, to think in advance about how the research will take place because things, there's a difference between how things are at home and how things are in the country where you go, just the various logistical issues that can come up. And so in my case, what I did is before departing for at least 6 weeks, I set up all kinds of interviews because you were going for shorter segments. I set up all the meetings that I wanted to do. I had already communicated with my research assistant. So when I arrived, I was ready to go. And of course, a lot of things went wrong, things got canceled, but at least I had some momentum because you were going for a short period of time. So you want to, really use your time productively. And things will change. I mean, obviously, we know with COVID, things can change pretty quickly. But even politically, like in Kyrgyzstan this year, there's a lot of political upheaval. I'm sure, for people who would have gone last year, it would have made the research more difficult. So you have to be flexible. and yet you have to present a schedule of the plan, like a timeline. And also to think, the final thing I'll say is to, in your application, also to really think about the dissemination plan. And so I think we all have, as scholars, a strong sense of the research that we want to accomplish and why it's valuable. But I think to demonstrate to an external evaluator who may not be part of your discipline how it's going to contribute to your discipline, to the field, but also to the relations between the United States and the country where you're going. I think that's the part that really needs to be kind of fleshed out in the application, and that we don't necessarily think about at first.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing that, Vanessa. I appreciate you also sharing what, it seems like your ability to be flexible was incredibly important for you to be able to do this successfully. And I would just like to echo what you mentioned about the application as well. I kind of alluded to it earlier, but just to reiterate, we do ask you to present what you plan to do. So you do need to plan, but that plan can always change. And also to articulate as best you can just what the potential benefits are for you, pursuing this opportunity. How could it benefit you, but also your host community, your host institution, and your host country as well. So thank you for that. So, and next, I would like to hear from Paul. If I could get, sorry about that. Yeah, so Paul Ode, please share your story.
Yeah, so my name is Paul Ode. I'm a professor of in entomology at Colorado State University. And actually, both my wife and I, Meena Balgopal, who's also faculty in biology at Colorado State, we were both fortunate enough to get these Flex awards. And so we went in, originally we were going to go in fall of 2018, but then fortunately, because Fulbright, in part because of this Flex program, we were able to postpone things. And a big part of that was that both Meena and myself had projects that were in these restricted areas of India. Meena was doing work in the Andaman Islands, and I was doing work in Sikkim, which is up in one of the northeast states that's in between Nepal and Bhutan, and also borders Tibet. And so they're politically sensitive areas. And it just took us a long time to get research area permits that would, through the Indian government, that would allow us to do work there. And so yes, one of the very nice aspects of the Flex program was that, even though our original plan was to go in fall of 2018, we were able to push it back until we were both able to get our required permits. It also took me a long time getting a research visa, just to do research within the country. And that was another thing that, even though Fulbright was very, very good about working with us and trying to facilitate things both from the U.S. side as well as the Indian side, it just took a long time. And so having that flexibility really, in the end, helped tremendously. Sort of project-wise, my research was, I'm a plant insect ecologist, and so I'm very interested in, especially being in Colorado, where working in the Rocky Mountains, interested in trophic interactions between plants, their insect herbivores, and then these parasitic insects that attack those insect herbivores. And how do those relationships change when you go from lower elevations to higher elevations? And there were two areas of India that I really wanted to look at these types of questions. One was in southern India in the Western Ghats, and then of course in the Himalaya. And of course you don't get any more elevation gradient than the Himalaya. So it was the Flex program turned out to be a very nice option because, while I was originally interested in working in this one particular system of plants and their insects associates, they have very different phenologies. That is, that they have in between the Western Ghats and the Himalaya. And so in the Western Ghats, they tend to be, the plants are, actively growing in like February, March, April, but in Himalaya, a lot of that area is still under snow. And so being able to go back in May and June really worked out well. And so we had a total of 4 months, but we were able to split it into roughly 2 months and 2 months. And so that worked out very well, so that I was able to spend most of my time in the Western Ghats, down in the south in the February, March, April, and then spent the second portion of our stay in the Himalaya up north. Kind of both professionally and personally, the flex option also worked out very nicely because I had a couple of PhD students that were needed to finish up in May, and so I was able to travel back to the States and supervise their defenses. I was also on another PhD defense committee in Sweden, so I was able to sneak a trip into there in between these two trips to India. So yeah, it was. I mean, I really did like the flex option. To be honest, when I was first looking into Fulbright as an option to fund our sabbatical, that it was, I really didn't know much about the flex, and to be honest, I didn't really even know it existed. But once I started looking into it, I mean, it just had a lot of, being called flex, really sums it up in a lot of regards. I mean, it really was truly flexible. And if I remember the conditions correctly, that we had a total of 4 months. They had to be split into two, perhaps even 3 different visits. And I think we had like almost a year and a half or close to 2 years in which we could, from the start of the first to the end of the second visit. And it just very, very much worked out well. I mean, especially given all the, kind of the logistical challenges of doing research in another country, and especially one where there potentially is a lot of red tape and requiring special permission, not only to do research in the country in general, but to travel and do research in very restricted areas. And so that was very, very welcome. And I guess the last thing strictly personally, it was nice because our son graduated college and we were able to come back and participate in his graduation. So that was very welcome as well.
Right. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. I was pleased to see. I think sometimes couples will take on a Fulbright kind of together, even if one partner is the one pursuing it. But I was glad to see that you both were really able to benefit from your time there. That's great.
And we had originally both applied thinking, it'd be great if one of us got it. And it just turned out that it was even doubly great that we both did. So
fantastic. Thank you again. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to invite Victor, who, as you can see, has quite a bit of Fulbright experience, to share his story.
Hi, thank you. So for me, similar scenario, I'm in STEM, I'm an ecologist and evolutionary biologist. I was interested in working in Latin America, but because I'm a fundamental scientist, not an applied scientist, there's a really interesting transition that was attracting me to the region. This transition of focusing on applied disciplines to thinking about emerging challenges. So think COVID-19, climate change. So the idea here is how do you spur innovation if all you're doing is this applied work? And I really the Flex Award spins off of some work that I did in the core Fulbright, which I did during my sabbatical. And I wanted to, I really had a great experience. I wanted to do something with Fulbright, but when I saw the Flex Award, it really gave me that flexibility to go back around, not having to wait for my next sabbatical and build up my research in tropical biology. So I kind of jumped on it. El Salvador has this really interesting challenge, as does the region, which is that it's a small country, right? It's about the size of New Jersey, and there's 33 universities, but only one of those universities has a biology department. So there's not a lot of these exposure to fundamental sciences. So I was giving a talk on the ecology of climate change to kind of bridge with all these applied fields that are in country. And a professor approached me about collaborating on an insect species that happens to be a vector for Chagas disease. And they wanted to know how climate change might be impacting these populations. So at the time, there was only 3 years of data. And so it was clear that we would need to kind of pilot some ideas first. So, this is pre-pandemic. We were chatting over Skype. And the idea was to basically explore synergies. So basically our planning starts there, right? We each had objectives. El Salvador was interested in research mentoring, and I was interested in developing that vector ecology initiative. But the key really was to have conversations about how to build around shared objectives. So a lot of those conversations were exploring for that center, that thing where we overlapped the most. And once we found a way to connect, that professor shared a data set, and students, undergraduate students here in the U.S. and worked with undergraduate students in El Salvador via Skype. And we got to send, students to conferences in both countries. And we kind of used this as the basis for that long-term collaboration, Fulbright. So the way that the flex was back then, this is 2016 to 2018, it was 3 years and it was 6 months. So I basically split 2 months each year. And so I designed it as a hybrid so that I could create synergies from the in-person visits to online collaborations during the remainder of the year. And, even pre-pandemic, web conferencing was a very big tool in Latin America. This is how they would save money from flying folks from London. They would just have them do Skype webinars. It was a little eerie back then. It's improved much more now with the online tools that we've got to bear. But the model is basically each summer here in the US, there would be a 2-month in-person visit. We would design experiments, collect data, analyze it. I would give a few workshops to basically strengthen that partnership. Remember, they were interested in that mentorship aspect. And then during the remainder of the year, when I was back here in the US, we would have regularly scheduled conversations over Skype. And sometimes that included reanalyzing data, but the majority of our time was literally spent writing, which was what they were interested in, right? That was advancing both of our individual objectives of mentorship and vector ecology. So by the end of that year, a calendar year, we would end up submitting a manuscript. And so my flex ended in 18, but we continue to work electronically. And so far we've published 4 of those papers that we started. We're currently working on our 5th now, all stemming from that flex. And the collaboration's been super optimized now that I was invited to serve as a research associate with the university to continue to support that program. In terms of experience, I feel like Fulbright made me a better professor. Let me explain. As faculty, we're jacks of all trades, right? It's in our DNA. We do research, we teach, we carry out diverse ways of serving the university community as well as the broader public community through outreach. But really, those initiatives, I feel, keep us isolated, right? We're kind of like cowboys. We're all independently carrying these things out. Fulbright reintroduced me to teamwork. You can't have a team with just goalies or just forwards. You need to have partnerships because, the truth is in the 21st century, there are no more monodisciplinary problems. They're all multidisciplinary. So I feel like El Salvador was able to show me through this flex a way to champion that environmental justice, which is something that I've always been interested in, to do in my work. And here the team allows me to do that. There are challenges, of course, and I want to leave it to the Q&A to follow up on those. But I feel like having that regular contact allowed me to kind of hammer out a lot of the objectives, because calibrating those with the host institute was really the center core for anything that we did. So if I felt that something extra needed to be done, it was always in terms of that core. And if the institute felt like they wanted me to do an extra workshop, it was always in terms of that core. Like, how do we build on what we both want from that experience and then supplement from there? And it's been very productive. And it's also been a wonderful experience to see all those students that I collaborated with both here in the States and abroad now going to PhDs and coming back as faculty. It's really exciting because now, you know, they're emailing me to collaborate in different ways now. So it's a great synergy, and I'm really happy I stumbled onto it. I feel like this was by a happy coincidence that I happened to be doing a lecture and someone popped by and says, "Hey, do you want to do something awesome?" So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think anyone who works in academia can tell you that that's often how a lot of the greatest partnerships you have happen. You might be in line for coffee at a conference with that person. You might be sitting next to each other at a presentation, or you might be the presenter and the watcher that connect afterwards. And I was also really appreciated you sharing just the extent of the impact that these awards have had for you. Obviously, Flex was one of the multiple Fulbright opportunities that you've had, and you can tell that that foundation you were able to lay with just your previous work and your previous Fulbright really allowed you to do, just really maximize your time abroad when you went in 2016 and onwards. So thank you so much for that. I would like to remind everyone that I meant to mention it earlier, so forgive me, but at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a Q&A box. So we'll be answering questions in just a minute, but in the meantime, you are welcome to start entering those in there just whenever they come to you, and either that panelist or I are happy to answer them. So one other thing I wanted to, just while everyone's here, to take, I wanted to make sure that it was clear to everyone what the application process is. I think all of the alumni have kind of alluded to something during the application process that, you know, they were able to, whether it's a challenge or just something to keep in mind about it. But the application process is quite lengthy. And so whenever I talk about any kinds of awards for Fulbright, I always like everyone to know what train you're getting on exactly as far as the application goes. So as you all know, the application cycle is currently open. And Vanessa, I also appreciate you mentioned the time that it can take for you to maybe make your arrangements. And I think the application cycle is open for quite a few months. And that's really a big reason why. I think now is still a great time. You're not out of time. You have about 3 months from today to put all of your application materials together for the September 15th deadline. And to be very clear, what you are applying for during this cycle are for awards that will take place beginning in the 22-23 academic year. So you're applying now for the next academic year and beyond if your flex is over 1 year long. In September, we review these applications here at the Institute for International Education just to make sure everything is complete. Then peer review committees meet throughout the fall to determine whether or not you're recommended, which in the Fulbright world really means that you've been shortlisted for an award. Then from there, your applications are then sent to the country office where they conduct their own review, and the results of that review, as well as final approval from the State Department at the Fulbright Foreign Scholarship Board, will determine who is selected. You're notified of your selection really throughout the spring. It can be as early as January. It can be as late as April. It really does. So a wide range, but that's also an honest answer. I think it can take, it varies quite greatly as far as when we receive those decisions. And then from May onward, hopefully you've applied, been selected, and you can start planning to, plan your time abroad. So that is what I have to share with you for now. But I did want to open it up to questions. And I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen so you can see everyone's lovely faces. Hello. And so one question, I think you all have been pretty positive, which I appreciate. And even though you've had challenges, I can tell I'm actually not surprised that you all were successful as Fulbrighters, because I think, how you approach challenges as they come up really has a lot to do with how they are resolved. And I think you've all been shown, I know, I appreciate, Paul, you pointing out why it is called Flex, because you do have to be flexible. But I was curious if there were any resources, both during the application process as well as during your grants, that you found particularly helpful that you would want to maybe bring to everyone's attention today. And this could be something maybe at your home institution, something at IIE, something in country. Victor, you raised your hand. Feel free to unmute and let us know what you think.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight something Vanessa said earlier, and about the host letter. So I would say that the best resource is be stubborn because you really need to connect with that host. That's the foundation for the success of this relationship that you're about to embark on. Think of it a long-term relationship. It involves a lot of work from both parties. And you just have to be stubborn because, if you're having trouble connecting with a host, that's a sign, that's a sign that maybe another host may be a better connection. It really starts from that point. So just be stubborn. Don't put all of your eggs in one basket. I guess that would be kind of the generic advice, but connect with several institutions. They don't have to be academic. And as one of the questions in the chat or Q&A said, if you're not an academic, it's okay. It's all about that conversation you're having with that potential host. And there's a lot of back and forth as you're finding that center, as you're finding a way to build up around it. Once you find it, everything else makes sense because they're aware you're interested in other things. You have to go back to your institution. You have bosses there that have to be in line with this, and so do they. So it's just a matter of finding a common point. But you need to be stubborn. I was emailing several universities before I found the right place when I did that first core. And the same thing with the Flex. If it wasn't for that first set of conversations and piloting some of that data, we wouldn't have known to then follow up with another Fulbright.
Some institutions are used to doing this. So the American University in Central Asia, where I was affiliated, they had done this many times before. And so I think if you're having challenges, I think just contacting the Fulbright office and asking for examples of universities in the country you're interested in that have welcomed scholars before, that can solve a lot of issues, because some institutions might think it's a very difficult process and they don't know how to handle it. But, if they've done it before, they have the process kind of worked out.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree with what Vanessa just said. I mean, that, working with an institution that has had previous experience with Fulbrighters really makes a big difference. But I think also working with Fulbright staff in the host country that you're interested in going to makes a huge difference, and they can really do a lot to facilitate, whom to contact within a given institution, whether it's an NGO or an academic institution or a government institution. They can really do a lot in terms of just making your life so much smoother that you would probably never be able to figure out on your own, or at least it would take months, if not years, of really trying to sort it all out, because a lot of it is can be pretty arcane in terms of just what the specific requirements are and what the order of which you need to do things. Certainly our experience with Fulbright, it was very good in that regard. It was I think I talked about trying to get research permits and permits to go to more restricted areas in the country, that they really helped every step of the way.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in, Paula. All these memories. The embassy is the office that set up the public affairs office is the one that set up that second talk where I ran into that professor. So you're absolutely right. They're like, hey, do you want to give a talk? And you're like, sure. I'll meet more folks. And next thing you know, more ideas were coming out of it. So they're always offering great advice. That's absolutely right.
That is fantastic. And I think arranging, and a couple of you have talked about arranging affiliations, that I think is, I will say, whether you're pursuing Flex or not, is really I would say a concern for people who maybe don't have many of their own contacts in country, which I think is perfectly understandable. So there have been a couple of questions in the question and answer box about, about invitations. So just something to keep in mind is to be, I think, you mentioned, Victor, like just to be persistent about how you pursue them. And that's something I would also recommend. We often at IIE get the question of like, I want to go to, El Salvador, and I don't really know anybody there, but there's this reason why I want to go. How should I connect? I always recommend that you do look very closely at the award description for the award for which you're applying. And because there are often contacts listed there. I know it sounds quite obvious, but that's a lot of information to weed through, so it's easy to miss things. There may be contacts listed at the Fulbright office and country, whether that's the U.S. Embassy or the Fulbright Commission. And in many cases, they're more than happy to help U.S. academics make connections. But similarly, if you're at a U.S. institution, talk to your provost office, talk to your Office of International Programs, maybe your sponsored programs office. You may not even be aware that your institution might have a connection to to a university or an entity in the country to which you're applying. Obviously, some it's more probable than others, but you truly never know. And just having that connection can sometimes get someone to respond to your email, and that may result in you obtaining that letter of invitation. And yes, Victor.
I'll default. Vanessa, go ahead.
I just have a quick point, which is that the Fulbright is very well regarded and well known around the world. So even though we're talking about the difficulty of getting letters, many people around the world, if they get a request where the only thing you're asking is for an invitation, but you're saying, I would be getting all this financial support, they are actually honored in most cases to be inviting you. So it's also and I think sharing your project early to show that you're committed to this, you're not just, taking their time unnecessarily, but say, look, this is my project, this is why I want to come here. I would imagine in many, many situations you would get a favorable response.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I know in my case, I made sure that I not only got a good letter from somebody that I'd started corresponding with, a fellow, a colleague who is also faculty, but also making it clear in my application about, okay, well, how would I interact with that colleague, and how would I interact with that colleague's students, or, and so that's an academic example, but you could certainly do something very similar, whether you're working with an NGO or what have you. So, but I think just the more you can show that you truly are going to be interacting with people in your host country, and that's if that's at all reflected in the letter of invitation, I think that probably helps a lot too. I don't know if it's necessarily a requirement, but it's probably not a bad strategy.
No, I think that can help. I think that to the extent to which you can kind of demonstrate what is possible by you being affiliated with this host, and of course you can't predict everything before you go, but it is important for a letter to, and for some awards it's not required. I think for many awards for Flex it is, so that's something I'm happy to help you all navigate if that's unclear to you. But I think in terms of your planning, it's very important for you to, I think, have an idea of where you'll be making these trips in the future, and just how exactly logistically, the logistics alone, I think, require you having, solid connections who are familiar with you and what you plan to do. There have been a couple of questions sorry, Victor, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to throw two ideas out that have been kind of, I found them really helpful. Because of the pandemic, everyone now is very comfortable with web conferencing. So in that initial email that you send out, the best thing to do is keep it short, and you say, hey, I would like to work with you. Can we schedule a Zoom? And in that conversation, now you can start kind of developing that relationship. Also, in terms of projects, don't have the entire project designed. Instead, in that Zoom conversation, maybe hit the topics are like, I'm interested in this, this, and this, see what the partner is also interested in, and see if there's a good fit for the project to kind of be a hybrid of those two. So I found it very powerful to have a conversation about how you could collaborate rather than, can you support my project, which is not the approach you want to adopt to begin with, right? You want to have something that's synergistic.
Yeah. Well, and importantly, I think that also makes it very clear that they will also benefit from you being there. Like, for you to helicopter in and do your work, of course, it's easy to articulate how that's beneficial to you. But, I think most institutions, I know I certainly would respond much better to someone looking to partner with me instead of looking to me for assistance. I think those are two very different requests. And I think looking for a partnership is better received, and I think also is more accurate as to the point of this whole program. So I think that I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's very important. There have been a couple of questions of just eligibility and who specifically is eligible for these types of awards. I think you'll find, other than the eligibility things that I mentioned earlier, like that you need to be a U.S. citizen and that sort of thing, it actually can vary quite significantly from award to award. You do not need to be affiliated with a U.S. institution. That's a question that someone did ask. We have many independent or unaffiliated scholars who are successful every year. There are some awards that do require that you have a PhD, but just to reiterate, that is not required for all awards. I think it depends on the country where you're going and the specific opportunity for which you're applying. There are many that, a terminal degree is not necessarily required. And in that case, they would, a review committee would look very closely at your professional or artistic accomplishments to make sure that this could, be a good fit for you. There was also a question, just a little bit more about how Flex works, like how, how long you can go, just those kinds of logistical things. And again, that does vary from award to award. So I encourage you, it's always on the first page on the award details tab. And before we end quickly, I'd be happy to maybe show you all where you find that information. But in many cases, it can be multiple trips over maybe one academic year or over 2 consecutive years. For the vast majority of awards that I'm familiar with, that is, those are the parameters. Some countries may have, and I always say it depends because it does. Like there's not one that's really universal. Like for example, some countries may allow you to, maybe spread, maybe make multiple shorter trips that might be as short as 1 month. There are others that look for your trips to be at least 3 months each time you go. That really does vary. And someone also asked if they could, if there are restrictions on the time of year where you go as well, which I actually think is a great question. You do, depending on what you're doing, it can be more beneficial for you to be in country during the academic year. That also varies too. That's actually a good, during the invitation process, actually, I would be very clear with your collaborators just when you would be able to travel and also know from them when it's most beneficial for you to be on location. Because that may, some universities, I feel like many American universities are more accustomed to maybe more year-round operations and year-round, resources being consistently available throughout the year, even though the activities on campus can vary. Around the world, that can vary as well. So just to, to be aware of that. And someone also did ask about research, because Paul, you mentioned research permits that you had to obtain, and, someone asked just how, how that works, how that's, that's something that usually you would pursue after you have been awarded a grant. And in any case like that, the office in the host country, so like, in Paul's case, I'm sure he worked very closely with the Fulbright office in India to, pursue that approval. And I think that's something that we as program staff here will always defer to the country office. But as you can imagine, this is their job. This is what they do. They're used to helping Americans come to country to do research or teach or take on professional projects. And so that's something that they can assist you with. All right. And then someone also had a question about, before we wrap, because I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, but if it's all right, I would like to show how you find information about specific awards, because if we can go over just a couple minutes, because someone also asked about compensation, and that's included in the award descriptions as well. So I'm going to share my screen if you all will bear with me just a moment. And also it's just good to know where to find the awards catalog. So okay, can you all see the awards catalog or Fulbright website? Okay, this is, since I'm on program staff, you can see I'm logged in, but this is awards.cies.org. So this is where you will find the awards catalog. So the vast majority of the information you'll need for a specific opportunity, you'll find here. So You can search from this homepage. So if you scroll down, there's more information about the program, which is always helpful to review. But you can search by region, by country, or by discipline, or if you want to see what's available globally, you can just click Search Awards. You can see there's over 400 awards available. To see, so you say you know that Flex will work for you. If you go under Grant Length, this will allow you to search for that under Flex and click Search Awards. There are 73 awards this year that allow you to pursue this option. I always find it easier to view as a list, personal preference. So let's look at Armenia as an example. So as you can see in Europe and Eurasia, in Armenia, in their All Disciplines Award, they do allow for Flex. So this is what an award description looks like. As you can see, things are categorized into different tabs. You'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, what activities you can pursue, who this is for, whether or not a PhD is required, which you can see for this award it is. And then if you scroll down, Flex option, yes. And so this, as you can see, is a lot of the questions you all have been asking, like how long can I go? How long does my trip have to be? How many times can I go? All those kinds of details are outlined for each individual award in this description right here. So as you can see for this award, you can apply for anywhere from 4 to 6 months. Your grant segments need to be at least 1 month and up. They can be up to 3 months for Flex. And you can have up to 3 segments that can be spread over 1 to 2 consecutive years. And so that's, and then there's other information, of course, additional requirements, information about invitation letters, that sort of thing. Someone did also ask a question about stipend. Under the stipend and benefits tab, you'll find the very important information about, financial benefits that you will receive so you can plan, and just general information as well about the country that the country office has chosen to share. So that is the awards catalog. And then very quickly, while I'm sharing my screen, CIES. So you may see the acronym CIES throughout Fulbright. CIES, which is where I am, is the division of the Institute of International Education that administers this program. So that's why our website is CIES.org. From this homepage, you'll be able to see that this is really where you will find everything that you need, including a link to the awards catalog in case you forget where it is. There are these different tabs for the different types of opportunities we have. For U.S. scholars, you will find all the information for the U.S. Scholar Program. And again, as you can tell, all of our websites are arranged into tabs to kind of organize information. So you'll see an overview of the program, a review of eligibility requirements, the review criteria, which I encourage you to review very closely as you put your application together, a reminder of the timeline I mentioned earlier, some frequently asked questions, and then the application tab, which is where I find applicants really, many of the questions we get are actually, the answers are found here. So I encourage you, if you want to look more into applying, to investigate this. If you scroll down, you'll see there's application instructions, but also for all of the application materials, there is more pointed guidance here for each one. So if you click on the arrows next to it, it'll expand to just give you more specific information for that criterion. So this is a resource that's available to you. And also we have webinars like this really throughout the year, but if you go to Connect with Fulbright, you'll also find more information. And again, you can get to all of these places through CIES.org. That's really the one thing. If you walk away with one website today, that's what I want you to remember. We have office hours that allow you to talk face-to-face and in a Zoom call, kind of like this, to ask program staff questions. We have webinars like this one, but also an archive to previous ones, so you can view things that have been recorded to gain more information. And also a way to register your interest as well. So we send out resources regularly to people who've kind of officially registered their interest with Fulbright, and we can so that's a great way to stay up to date on the program and receive application resources. And if any of you, and for the alumni as well, I would like you to also pay attention to this. If you know someone who you think might benefit from this kind of experience, you can also refer a colleague here. So if you follow this button. You'll be taken to a form. You can fill out some information. Don't worry, they'll just get one email that they can respond to or not. It's up to them. But this can also, it's just another way to kind of share information about Fulbright. So I think with that, oh yes, Vanessa.
It's just really a really quick question. I don't know if it's only to the, because something with Kyrgyzstan, but when I did the research by selecting Flex, Kyrgyzstan did not come on that list. However, when I went to the page for Kyrgyzstan, the page of awards, then the Flex option was mentioned. So I think, I don't know if it's just in this case, maybe it was not included in that original list, but I think it's good to also double check.
Okay.
If it does not appear on that Flex list, to at least go to the country's page and check if they have a Flex option.
Okay, thank you for that. That is good feedback. So it's always good to double check because you never know. You want to make sure you've exhausted all of your options before you kind of commit to something. So thank you for that. So with that, I appreciate everyone. Almost everyone stayed on a little bit over. So thank you for taking the time. I want to be respectful of our panelists' time and your time as participants, but I really appreciated our alumni, all of you. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. I always find that is far more helpful than anything that I really can share as program staff. So I just wanted to thank you. And you know, this webinar, as you can, this webinar was recorded, and so it will be available on our website hopefully soon if you would like to watch it again, or you'd like to share it with people you think might be interested. So with that, I'd like to wish everyone a great weekend, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.